What is up, Watch fam? I am Christian from Theo and Harris, and today I'm back here at London Jewelers' Oculus location. We're going to hop into the Panerai collection and talk about some of the pieces that I think are quite interesting, and we're going to find out kind of if I'm right. So let's do it. So we have three pieces. First, the PAM 655, a 42mm Radiomir with a brilliant white dial, sub-seconds at 9, and faux patina. The PAM 974, which is a rose gold Luminor Submersible. It is the second generation of this model, and although maybe a little bit, kind of crazy for a Panerai, I can't wait to get my thoughts on that one. And finally, a very popular model at the moment, the 45mm automatic Luminor PAM 943. It's got a beautiful dial, very slim case, and of course a sapphire case back. So before we get into these watches, in order for me really to assess these models and think critically about how they fit in Panerai's current collection and what they mean to the history of the brand and all those sorts of things, we need to talk about the history of the brand. What is Panerai? Like a few other major brands, Panerai has a rich history of manufacturing true tool watches. In 1938, they released the Radiomir specifically for the Italian Navy. And the Luminor in 1949 succeeded the Radiomir using a less radioactive, but still radioactive material. As one would imagine, Panerai, a brand that supplied military watches, did shrink post-wartime. And then it was in 1993 that the brand was totally revived and brought back to importance. But this time, not B2B with governments, but with retail. Panerai actually became a consumer brand. Panerai was no longer a manufacturer of strictly no-frills dive watches, rather of luxury watches that embodied much of the Panerai identity. And that identity, and this is a big deal, is easily identifiable. Their design hallmarks, their language is so obvious. The iconic crown protector of the Luminor, the cushion case of the Radiomir. This example does not feature those iconic wire lugs, but so many do. A Panerai, and this is huge, does not need to say Panerai on it to be recognizable. They own their designs. Anything that looks like a Panerai has been stolen from Panerai, and that's big. So enough history, let's get into the watches we have in front of us. First, the PAM 655. Now this is a great watch, and I think it's a pretty interesting Radiomir. Now I'm a really big fan of the traditional Radiomir case. I even love when they're 45mm, super big, even though I certainly can't wear them. I just admire them. And one of the things I admire about them so much is how lugless they are, right? While their cases are pretty substantial, the lugs are always very short. So despite the fact that I can't wear a 45mm Radiomir, it's always really close. And this model does the same thing, but at 42mm, I actually can wear it, I think. But watch design isn't just about size, of course, it's about color, it's about originality of layout, and ultimately, I think it's about balance and proportion. And I think on all three of those fronts, Panerai does really well. Let's start off with color. This is a white dial Panerai, which is certainly unusual. When you think Panerai, you definitely think black. And if not black, then at least gray is close to black, so those models make sense. But while we don't associate Panerai with white, there's certainly nothing inherently wrong with a white Panerai, and frankly, I think the colors work really well. First, with legibility. Because of this white canvas, the numerals, specifically the 12, 3, and 6, are extremely legible. Now, of course, the other big color note here would be faux patina. I've gone on about this before. I'll do it briefly again. I happen to like faux patina. I see nothing wrong with it. I absolutely think Panerai did a good job with this, with the faux patina. Yeah, is it mimicking aging? Yeah, it is. Does it matter to me? Not really, or actually, not at all. And as far as proportion is concerned, even though the dial is large, being a 42mm watch, and even though it's white, which almost always appears much larger than a black dial, it doesn't seem spacey It doesn't seem empty. And Panerai omitted the date window as well, which is something that they easily could have done to fill up that dial. I think it's terrific. Very little font. Of course, the sub-second at 9. I think it's overall a great design. Powering the watch is the P4000 caliber. Now, a luxury movement powering a Panerai historically is antithetical. It doesn't really fit or make sense. But Panerai is a new brand now than they were in the mid-20th century, and we have to accept that. And in that, Panerai's done a very good job. These movements, while comparably simple in architecture, are fairly interesting. It does have one interesting variable, and that is, of course, the microtor. But looking beyond that, the finishing on the watch is certainly not excessive. It has been finished. The bevels are wide and pretty. I would say that from a technical perspective, it's probably on par for what we would expect at $10,000, which of course buys you a luxury watch, and of course is a lot of money. But I would say, dollar for dollar, a movement like this, in a watch that I find this attractive and well-balanced, probably represents pretty significant value, which is not something that Panerai has been synonymous with since their rebirth in '93. So I definitely give this watch a positive rating. Okay, let's move on to something a bit more expensive, the PAM 974, which is the successor to Panerai's 2017 Luminor Submersible Oro Rosso, called the 684. Now, the 684 was a big deal when it came out because it solved a lot of the problems that many people had with the Submersible, being that the Submersible at 46 millimeters was just so darn large. But that model at 42 millimeters was way more manageable. And I'm very surprised to say that even on my wrist, which is about 7 inches, this watch, which again is not the 684, it is the 974, the successor, really fits quite well. It's certainly larger than the 655 we just tried on, but still manageable. Now, the big improvement that this new 974 has over its predecessor, the 684, was the color. Panerai is calling this rose gold mixture Goldtec. It's a new gold alloy, which unlike standard yellow gold, is made up of a mixture of copper and platinum. If you have tried on many rose gold watches, you certainly know that every rose gold has a different mixture. Rolex's rose gold is different than AP's, it's different than Pateks. Some are softer, some more saturated. And I think, while I haven't seen the predecessor to this, which was criticized, I think that this color is really, really lovely. Certainly on that saturated side, which I do like. This piece comes in at $26,700, a price that I'm sure is mostly driven by the precious metal. The piece features a matte black dial, which is matched by the ceramic anti-reflective bezel. I'm a big fan of these matte anti-reflective bezels. I think they do a lot to make a watch less flashy, particularly on a watch that is so inherently flashy. It makes it more, at least seemingly, sporty and durable. If you think that Panerai using this matte ceramic bezel was probably a better decision than the reflective shiny ceramic, if that made it more sporty, go ahead and like this video. The piece features a display caseback, which gives owners the opportunity to look into the OP34 caliber, which is automatic winding, and I would say finished consistently with the movement we just looked at in the Radiomir. The piece comes on both a black alligator strap as well as the more traditional submersible rubber strap. Overall, this watch is widely loved, and I can absolutely say that I agree with the fanfare, despite being someone that absolutely chooses Cartier over sports watches in an average day. This piece does a great job. The one drawback, and really more in theory than in function, is the water resistance at only 100 millimeters, while all other submersibles are coming in at 300 meters. That does make this watch, of course, less resistant, less durable. It technically does make this watch do its job, to a lesser degree than the rest of the line. That being said, are people really taking these submersibles and using them for their, marketing intention? Probably not. I'd say those people are very few and far between. But I am certainly curious as why Panerai would do that when they know people would complain, rightfully or wrongfully. To me, it just seems easier to, avoid that altogether and make the watch more resistant. Anyway, really cool piece. This one, the PAM 943, which is a 45 millimeter Luminor with a really pretty, a kind of brownish gray dial. It is a sandwich dial, which Panerai has become totally synonymous with, which I'm a huge fan of. Of course, if you guys haven't seen sandwich dials before, it's a term used to describe the effect of basically when there are two dials laying on top of each other for all intents and purposes, the top dial having a cutout for all of the markings as opposed to the markings being painted on to the dial. There are two significant differences between this Luminor and the first watch we spoke about, which was a Radiomir. Of course, looking beyond the fact that one's a Luminor and the other one's a Radiomir. They are the date and the power reserve. This watch, which is fitted with the P4001 caliber, very similar fundamentally to the P4000, has a 3-day power reserve, which is certainly impressive and useful. This watch also features the date, which, to be honest, I don't love. Panerai did a pretty good job integrating the date into the overall design, and I understand this watch being 45 millimeters, being 3 millimeters larger than the Radiomir, there is more empty space in the dial, so they felt like they had to fill it up. And maybe they're right. Maybe this watch would have felt a little bit empty without that complication. I'm just certainly biased. I don't love date windows, but again, superficial criticism. I think that this watch is perfect to recommend to someone that loves the size and maybe the history of Panerai, but has always wanted a sleeker, more refined watch. Because everything about this piece, from the dial to the strap to the thinness of the overall case, is more refined. It is more formal and dressy, while of course not compromising on the, toughness and overall substance and heft of Panerai. And pushing people in the way of the refined is certainly something that I do quite often. So that's it, guys. I am glad that I picked out these pieces. I really enjoyed spending time with them. Panerai is, of course, a brand while I absolutely appreciate. I do have a hard time finding one that I like simply because of my own wrist size. But I think Panerai has done a really good job at balancing the design of their watches and making them more wearable. So great job, Panerai. Thank you guys all for watching. If you liked this video, please like it. And if you love watches, go ahead and subscribe to our channel at Theo and Harris. See you all soon.